In a rapidly evolving geopolitical landscape, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio's recent diplomatic engagements with Turkey highlight the complexities of international relations amid regional unrest and ongoing conflicts. As tensions rise due to Turkey's internal protests and its unique position in the Russia-Ukraine war, Rubio's push for cooperation with Ankara may serve as a double-edged sword. During a meeting with Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan, Fidan, Rubio emphasized the importance of Turkey's support in achieving peace in Ukraine, a conflict that has persisted for 3 years and has drawn in various international stakeholders. We discussed efforts to establish a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine, Rubio noted, signaling an urgent need for collaborative diplomatic efforts. The Biden administration has previously expressed concerns regarding Turkey's continued trade with Russia, which complicates its relationship with the U.S. as they both navigate this multifaceted crisis. Fidan's visit to Washington comes at a critical moment when U.S. Turkey relations are at a crossroads, especially after a phone call between Presidents Trump and Erdogan that was described as transformational by Trump's special envoy for the Middle East, Steve Witkoff. This phone call underscores the warming ties between the two nations, which have experienced significant strain under Biden's leadership. The Turkish government, facing domestic protests over the imprisonment of opposition figures including Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu, is keen on mending fences with the U.S. amid mounting criticism over its human rights record. The protests in Turkey, sparked by political repression, have raised eyebrows in Washington. Rubio conveyed U.S. concerns regarding these developments but faced criticism for not addressing them more forcefully. Analysts suggest that Trump's previous leniency towards Erdogan may have emboldened the Turkish leader, allowing him to act against his challengers with less fear of repercussions from the U.S. government. As such, the delicate balance between addressing human rights issues and pursuing strategic alliances remains a critical challenge for U.S. policymakers. In addition to discussing the Ukraine conflict, Rubio and Fidan also touched on broader regional security issues, including stability in Syria and relations between Turkey, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. Turkey's role in the Syrian conflict has been significant, with Ankara supporting various rebel factions throughout the civil war. Fidan's insistence on a permanent ceasefire in Gaza further complicates the narrative, as Turkey's support for Hamas contrasts sharply with U.S. and Israeli positions. While the U.S. aims to strengthen its economic partnership with Turkey, the backdrop of military cooperation, particularly regarding Turkey's exclusion from the F-35 program, remains contentious. The potential for improved ties hinges on Turkey's response to U.S. sanctions and its commitments to NATO obligations. As U.S. officials navigate these intricate relationships, the outcomes of Rubio's discussions with Fidan may have lasting implications for regional stability and U.S. foreign policy in the years to come. The crystallization of U.S.-Turkey ties could either pave the way for collaborative efforts in conflict resolution or exacerbate existing tensions, depending on how both nations address the underlying issues at play. With the stakes higher than ever, all eyes will be on Ankara as it seeks to balance its international commitments against domestic pressures. In a startling revelation, the Trump administration's handling of sensitive military plans has come under fire following a significant breach of communication protocols. The incident unfolded when a group chat on the secure messaging app Signal, which included high-ranking national security officials and inadvertently the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, became the focus of scrutiny. The chat contained discussions about military operations targeting Yemen's Houthi forces, raising questions about the security measures in place for sharing classified information. On March 25, 2025, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth was confronted about the breach during a Senate hearing. When asked about the plans shared in the Signal group, he stated, "Nobody was texting war plans. And that's all I have to say about that." This sentiment was echoed by Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence, who assured the Senate Intelligence Committee that no classified material had been exchanged in the group, a claim reiterated by CIA Director John Ratcliffe. However, the incident has drawn intense criticism from Democratic lawmakers who argue that the administration's casual approach to sensitive information could have dire consequences. President Trump, addressing the situation, downplayed the incident, referring to it as the only glitch in 2 months of his administration. He emphasized that no classified information was involved and deflected blame onto a staffer who allegedly added Goldberg to the chat inadvertently. "Michael Waltz has learned a lesson and he's a good man," Trump said, expressing his confidence in the national security advisor while simultaneously attacking The Atlantic and its editorial staff. The fallout from the incident has been severe, with lawmakers expressing outrage over the use of a public messaging app to discuss sensitive military operations. Senator John Ossoff labeled the situation an embarrassment, criticizing the lack of accountability among senior officials. The situation is particularly poignant given Trump's past criticisms of Hillary Clinton regarding her handling of classified information via a private email server, further complicating the narrative for the administration. In the midst of these controversies, the administration has insisted that the information shared did not violate any classified protocols. Ratcliffe and Gabbard maintained that the messages, which included details about weapons packages and operational timing, were permissible under current guidelines. Nevertheless, Senator Mark Warner highlighted the gravity of the breach, warning that such security lapses could endanger lives if adversaries gain access to sensitive information. The administration's defense of its actions has not quelled calls for further investigation into the use of Signal for national security communications. Senator Ron Wyden has suggested that resignations may be in order, while FBI Director Kash Patel reported being newly briefed on the matter, indicating that an investigation may be forthcoming. As this situation continues to unfold, the implications for national security protocols are significant. The Trump administration's reliance on a messaging app designed for casual communication raises critical questions about the safeguarding of classified information in an increasingly digital age. With calls for accountability and transparency growing louder, the future of how sensitive communications are managed within the government remains uncertain. The incident serves as a stark reminder of the potential vulnerabilities in communication practices among those responsible for national security, emphasizing the need for stringent protocols to protect vital information. In a significant reshaping of public health leadership, President Donald Trump has announced the nomination of Susan Monarez as the new director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention (CDC). This decision comes after a controversial withdrawal of his initial pick, David Weldon, whose history of vaccine skepticism led to a lack of Senate support. Monarez, who has been serving as the acting director since January, is expected to closely collaborate with Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as part of the administration's ambitious Make America Healthy Again agenda. President Trump highlighted Monarez's qualifications in a recent Truth Social post, stating, "As an incredible mother and dedicated public servant, Dr. Monarez understands the importance of protecting our children, our communities, and our future." He further emphasized the need for the CDC to regain public trust, which he argues has been eroded due to political bias and disastrous mismanagement. Monarez's background includes previous roles at the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health and the Department of Homeland Security, lending her a diverse skill set for a pivotal role that will address pressing health challenges, including rising measles cases. Senate confirmation hearings for Monarez are expected to delve into the urgent health threats facing the nation, particularly the rising incidence of measles, an issue that has gained prominence in light of Kennedy's nuanced stance on vaccinations. While Kennedy has encouraged parents to reconsider measles vaccinations, he has refrained from making outright recommendations. This cautious approach has raised concerns among public health officials who fear that it may contribute to vaccine hesitancy. Under the new Trump administration, the CDC may undergo significant changes, including a re-evaluation of its approach to medical research publications. One contentious issue is the agency's planned study to investigate potential connections between vaccines and autism, despite extensive scientific consensus affirming that vaccines do not cause autism. As Monarez prepares to face the Senate Health, Education, Labor and Pensions Committee, where she will need 51 votes for confirmation, the implications of her leadership will be closely scrutinized. Simultaneously, Kennedy is cultivating a movement that extends beyond the confines of traditional public health discourse. His Make America Healthy Again initiative is not only challenging established norms within the CDC but also influencing food policy across the nation. Recent events showcase Kennedy's efforts to address nutritional concerns, such as a meeting with food industry leaders to promote healthier infant formula options and the removal of artificial dyes from products. Notably, a fast food chain has already adopted Kennedy's recommendations by changing its frying oil, reflecting the Kennedy factor in corporate decision-making. However, Kennedy's controversial history, particularly regarding vaccine skepticism, continues to shadow his initiatives. Critics, including prominent public health experts, have expressed concern that his focus on alternative health remedies and resistance to established scientific consensus may undermine broader public health efforts. Dr. Walter C. Willett, a leading figure in nutrition research, has voiced his apprehensions, stating he's destroying science in America. As Kennedy's influence grows, so too does the potential for friction with established health authorities and lawmakers. His skepticism towards refined oils and ultra-processed foods has alarmed various stakeholders, including legislators whose agricultural constituents rely on these industries. The response from the food and health sectors will be pivotal in determining whether Kennedy's agenda translates into meaningful policy changes or remains largely symbolic. In conclusion, the nomination of Susan Monarez and the burgeoning Make America Healthy Again movement signify a transformative moment in U.S. public health policy. As the administration navigates the complexities of public health amidst rising skepticism around vaccinations and health guidelines, the future trajectory of these initiatives will depend heavily on the interplay between political agendas, public trust, and scientific integrity. The coming weeks and months will be critical for Monarez as she seeks Senate confirmation, and for Kennedy as he implements a health agenda that promises to reshape American dietary and health practices. In a significant turn of events, U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi has announced the receipt of a substantial cache of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein from the FBI following her ultimatum for their release. In an interview with Fox News host Sean Hannity, Bondi described the delivery as a truckload of files, confirming that the documents were handed over right before her imposed deadline of 8 a.m. on Friday. This announcement comes after previous document releases fell short of public expectations, leading to heightened scrutiny over the handling of Epstein's extensive ties to high-profile individuals. "I gave the FBI a deadline of Friday at 8 a.m. to get us everything," Bondi stated, revealing that she had been tipped off about the location of the documents in the Southern District of New York. "We got them all by Friday at 8 a.m. Thousands of pages of documents. I have the FBI going through them, and Director Patel is going to get us a detailed report as to why the FBI withheld all of those documents," she added. The Attorney General's comments underscore a growing concern over transparency in the ongoing investigation into Epstein, a convicted sex offender whose connections to powerful figures have long been a source of public intrigue. Bondi emphasized the need for careful examination of the documents to protect the victims involved. "We're going to go through it as fast as we can, but go through it very cautiously to protect all the victims of Epstein," she remarked. However, the rollout of these documents has faced criticism from various quarters, particularly from lawmakers who had anticipated more substantial revelations. Representative Anna Paulina Luna, a Republican from Florida, expressed her dissatisfaction, stating, "I nor the task force were given or reviewed the Epstein documents being released today. This is not what we or the American people asked for, and a complete disappointment. Get us the information we asked for." This sentiment reflects a broader frustration among the public and lawmakers who are eager for greater accountability and clarity regarding Epstein's extensive network. Bondi has also been vocal in her criticism of the Biden administration, alleging that it had failed to act on the Epstein files during its tenure. "No one did anything with them. And why were they sitting in the Southern District of New York? I want a full report on that," she stated, suggesting a lack of commitment to transparency from the previous administration. As the Department of Justice grapples with the implications of the Epstein documents, questions about the integrity of the investigative process loom large. Critics have called for thorough inquiries into the management of these files, especially in light of ongoing concerns regarding the handling of sensitive information by government officials. The complexity of the situation is exacerbated by the political landscape, where allegations of negligence and lack of accountability continue to surface. Looking ahead, the implications of Bondi's revelations and the subsequent investigation into Epstein's expansive network could be profound. As more information becomes available, it is likely to spark further debate over the balance between public interest and confidentiality in high-profile criminal cases. The coming weeks will be critical as the DOJ processes the newly acquired files and determines the path forward, particularly in addressing the public's demand for transparency and justice in the Epstein saga. Whether this new administration can deliver on those expectations remains to be seen, but the stakes are undeniably high. As concerns over fiscal stability mount, the United States government is facing a potentially alarming financial scenario, with projections indicating it could run out of cash to fulfill its obligations as early as this summer. The Congressional Budget Office (CBO) recently highlighted that without an agreement on raising or suspending the national debt ceiling, the country may hit a critical juncture by late August or early September. This situation arises from the reinstatement of the debt limit, which was set at $36.1 trillion following a suspension under the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023. In a comprehensive report released on March 26, 2025, the CBO warned that the government's ability to utilize extraordinary measures, accounting maneuvers designed to stretch existing funds, will likely be exhausted by the summer. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has been actively communicating with Congress, emphasizing the urgency of addressing the debt limit to avoid a catastrophic default. "I respectfully urge Congress to act promptly to protect the full faith and credit of the United States," Bessent stated in a recent letter to legislative leaders. The political landscape complicating these discussions is fraught with tension. President Donald Trump has previously insisted that any legislative effort to avert a government shutdown must include provisions to raise or suspend the debt limit. "Anything else is a betrayal of our country," he remarked last December, a sentiment that underscores the political stakes involved. However, the Republican-led Senate has yet to demonstrate consensus on the proposed $4 trillion increase in the debt ceiling, adding to the uncertainty surrounding the negotiations. Democrats have expressed willingness to collaborate on a debt ceiling increase, but are adamant that such discussions should not be leveraged to advance tax cuts that they believe disproportionately benefit the wealthiest Americans. Democrats are ready to work across the aisle to prevent a catastrophic default. "But Republicans must work with us to protect Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid," said Brendan Boyle, a Democratic representative from Pennsylvania. The consequences of a potential default are serious, as the U.S. has never previously faced such a scenario concerning the statutory debt limit. Defaulting could lead to severe repercussions not only for the government's creditworthiness but also for the broader economy, potentially triggering increased borrowing costs and destabilizing financial markets. Amid these fiscal challenges, another significant issue has emerged: the ongoing debate over tariffs and international trade policies under the current administration. Former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers criticized Treasury Secretary Bessent's assertions regarding the impact of new tariffs on imports from China, calling them ludicrous. Summers contended that such tariffs would inevitably lead to increased prices domestically, countering Bessent's claim that manufacturers would absorb the costs. As the Trump administration's aggressive tariff policies take shape, the economic sentiment among consumers and businesses has grown increasingly sensitive to price fluctuations. Experts warn that these tariffs could lead to the highest average tariff rates in the U.S. since the 1940s, further complicating the economic landscape as the government grapples with its fiscal responsibilities. Looking ahead, the interplay between congressional action on the debt ceiling and the administration's tariff policies will be critical in shaping the economic environment. With the clock ticking toward the projected ex-state lawmakers face mounting pressure to reach a bipartisan agreement. The coming months will be crucial as the outcomes of these negotiations could have lasting implications on the U.S. economy and its global standing. As this complex situation unfolds, stakeholders will be keenly watching how Congress navigates these challenges to prevent a financial crisis. In a striking exchange that has captured the attention of political and economic observers, billionaire investor Mark Cuban has publicly criticized U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, questioning the value of Lutnick's contributions in the administration. Cuban's remarks surfaced on Blue Sky following a series of controversial statements made by Lutnick, particularly regarding Social Security and trade policies. Cuban's inquiry: has Howard Lutnick done anything of value as Commerce Secretary? Resonated with many who feel that Lutnick's recent comments reflect a disconnection from the financial realities faced by millions of Americans. This criticism was prompted by Lutnick's remarks on the All In podcast, where he suggested that complaints regarding delayed Social Security checks could be indicative of fraud. He contrasted his experiences with those of older Americans, implying that they would typically not voice complaints, thereby framing those who do as potential fraudsters. This perspective has been met with widespread backlash, with critics arguing that it dismisses the genuine struggles of retirees who depend on these checks for their livelihoods. One commenter on Cuban's post encapsulated the frustration felt by many, stating, "Lutnick is totally out of touch with reality. Many hard-working people who paid into the Social Security system live on these checks. Your fraudster comments are insulting." This sentiment underscores a growing concern that Lutnick's views may overlook the challenges faced by vulnerable populations. Cuban also took issue with Lutnick's endorsement of tariffs and the Trump administration's trade war strategy. In a previous CNBC interview, Lutnick praised these policies as beneficial for U.S. manufacturing, prompting Cuban to assert that the focus should shift towards the U.S.'s substantial trade surplus in services. America has a global trade surplus on services. Services have the highest margins and profits of our exports. That is where capital and expertise are focused, he stated, challenging Lutnick's emphasis on traditional manufacturing sectors. As the debate surrounding Lutnick's comments continues, the implications of his statements on trade policy and Social Security remain a point of contention. Critics argue that his views may exacerbate existing inequalities, particularly among those reliant on government assistance. On the other hand, supporters of Lutnick argue that his approach could bolster American manufacturing and job creation in the long term. This dialogue occurs against the backdrop of broader discussions about economic policy and social equity in the U.S. The administration's stance on tariffs and trade is particularly relevant as inflation persists and economic recovery from the pandemic remains uncertain. The Federal Reserve has indicated that Trump's aggressive tariff strategy may drive up prices, complicating the economic landscape even further. Cuban's pointed critique highlights a growing rift between those advocating for a return to traditional manufacturing and those calling for a more nuanced understanding of the U.S. economy's service-oriented strengths. As these conversations unfold, the future of U.S. economic policy may hinge on the administration's responsiveness to the concerns raised by influential voices like Cuban's, and whether it can strike a balance between manufacturing growth and the financial realities of American citizens. The efficacy of Lutnick's policies will likely be scrutinized as the country navigates these complex economic challenges in the months to come.